Hi and welcome. I'm Colleen, and I'll be guiding your Relax and Restore yoga class today. So, to get started, make sure you have all the props that you need. I usually recommend a bolster or a cylindrical type pillow, a couple blocks, a strap, and one of my favorite props these days is a suka mat or a little extra cushion for your knees. You can replicate this with a couple blankets, pillows, or even a little gardening kneeling pad as well. So, making sure you have everything that you need. Then, when you're ready to get started, reach for your blocks and your bolster and set them up just like this. So, I have my blocks about hip width apart and then the bolster right on top. And you can play around with the different height settings for the with the blocks just to see which you prefer. And then you can set all the other props off to the side. Bring your hips relatively close to the prop and then drape the legs over the bolster just like this. Make sure the back of the knees are supported. And if the legs are dangling off, that's perfectly okay. And then lay all the way back. Once you settle in, you might decide to inch your hips a little further forward or back, just depending on how that feels in the low back. Often, a little scoop of the hips, drawing them down and under, can help to create a little more length through the low back and spine, take some pressure off the low back. And then, as a little self adjustment, walk your shoulder blades a little closer together, drawing them down the back of the spine, and then let the arms come out nice and wide, ensuring that it feels comfortable for your shoulders here. So you can experiment with having them wider, a little closer to the hips, or maybe even practice them and reach them overhead. And then blink the eyes closed and begin to direct your mind's attention into the natural rhythm and cadence of the breath. As you breathe here, get curious about the length of the inhale as well as the depth of the exhale. And as you breathe here, what can you notice about the breath itself? Is it slightly cooler on the way in, a little warmer on the way out? Is the length of the breath more or less than what you thought it would be? And can you notice a subtle pause at the top and the bottom of the breath? Continue to keep the mind focused in the breath itself. And at the same time, let the body get a little bit heavier here. Let the weight of the legs rest into the support beneath them. Let the weight of your hips, your torso, the upper back and shoulder area, even the back of the head, sink into the earth beneath. Let the arms get even heavier still. And wherever they make contact with the earth, let them sink a little bit heavier until no part of you is engaged physically in any way. letting your entire being melt into support. Let yourself be held here. And this posture has many benefits, particularly in allowing the body to let go, to begin to shift the body out of a sympathetic state and into a parasympathetic state. And this is a state in which the body begins to relax and heal. You might notice your heart rate starting to slow and steady even more. And from an anatomical standpoint, this posture has many benefits for the low back. And if you're ever experiencing tired lower legs, you just need to take a load off. And we'll be here for another 20 more breaths, give or take. You can leave the entire count of the breath to me. Just simply rest and breathe. And should the mind wander or drift or start to run wild with thoughts, just simply notice that that's what the mind does. It thinks, it plans, it tries to figure everything out. And when you notice your mind doing just that, thinking, planning, just redirect it back to the breath. Notice the inhale, notice the exhale, and feel all the spaces in between. Last couple breaths here. Integrating a little bit of movement into the fingers, the toes. You might even trace a few little circles with the ankles and feet, following that up with a few circles from the wrist. And eventually draw both knees into the chest. Give yourself a great big squeeze, decompress the low back and spine. You might even rock a little bit from side to side. And then gently roll onto your right side. Rest there a moment into the fetal position. From there, you can push the earth away and rise all the way up into seated. We're here just momentarily. Reach for your bolster, have it within reach. You can set the blocks off to the side and preferably away from the upper body and arms. In fact, make sure that everything above you or above where the head will go and out to the side where the upper body goes is completely unobstructed. And then return onto your back. Place the bolster or your pillow in between the knees. Hug your knees into the chest and then allow the legs to again roll to the side. And you can roll all the way into the fetal position once again. Then from there, bring the hands to touch out to the right side. Let the head rest comfortably onto the floor, or you can always reach for a pillow and place it underneath the head. And then from there, let your left fingertips begin to wander. Let them reach overhead, circling, reaching to above the top edge of the mat. And then let your fingertips and arms start to reach open to the left side. And you can allow your torso now to roll towards the sky. Then bring your left hand a little bit lower, all the way across your left hip, your left thigh, and return it back over to your right hand. And then we'll take a few more circle rotations just like that with the arm, tracing a giant circle overhead, reaching arms out to the side, along your left hip, your left thigh. And as you do so, each time you rotate open, let your torso, your chest, rotate open skyward. So it's like you're rolling open into a twist. Now that you've got the gist of this movement, let the eyes softly close. Notice the various textures beneath the fingers, the areas that you feel more or less sensation. And then the next time you roll all the way open, take a moment to pause there. Add a little subtle personal adjustment by lifting your right shoulder slightly up and over to the right side. And if it's comfortable for you, here you can turn your head towards your left fingers. If there's any strain to the left arm, you could place a pillow underneath it. You can also cactus the left arm, or simply take the left arm out altogether and just indulge in the twist. Let the abdomen be relaxed. Let it soften just a little bit more. And as you continue to breathe here, notice how the inhale naturally lengthens the spine slightly, expands you from the inside to the outside, and reaches all the way to the edges of the skin. As you exhale, can you notice how the depth of the breath sets you in a little deeper, a little sweeter into the twist? Continue to breathe here. We'll be here for another 10 more breaths, give or take. You can Use this time as an opportunity to fully let go. Feeling again into the weight of the body, all the surfaces beneath you, and getting a little heavier and heavier with each breath you breathe. Follow this next breath all the way full. Empty it completely. And at the bottom of the breath, draw your navel to the spine and then gently roll, return all the way back to your right side. Rest here a couple moments for the spine to neutralize, to reset. And then evening things out, return onto your back. You can stay on, roll onto your back, knees bent, bolster between the knees. And then drawing your knees slightly inward, let them gently fall over to the left side. From there, roll entirely onto the left side. Bring your arms out to the side, palms to touch. And then begin to trace your circle rotations with your right arm. This time, let the right arm circle overhead. Reach it out to the right side. Take your right fingertips across your right hip, your right thigh, and all the way to the left side, and then circling it overhead once again. Couple more times, just like this, rotating the shoulder or the arm bone rather in the shoulder socket, creating a gentle twist up and through the spine, experimenting with a little bit of movement and how that can prepare the body to open. The next time the right arm comes out to the side, again, pause here. Several options for you. Keep the right arm out to the side. You could cactus the arm. You could even have a little prop underneath. Or if you're finding that is causing any strain to the shoulder, you could again remove the arm from the equation. Just let the hands rest on the ribs or wherever it feels most comfortable in your skin. With a little self adjustment, lift your left shoulder blade slightly up and over to the left side. This will help you to rotate a little higher up through the spine and can sometimes take some of the pressure off the low back and the SI. And then once you've found a sweet spot to settle in, once again, close the eyes if you haven't already. Relax the abdomen. Let the belly fill like your favorite colored balloon each time you breathe in. Time you breathe out, feel the belly soften back towards the spine. Again, feel the points of the body that are connected to the floor beneath you. And experiment and explore with all the ways you can sink in and get a little heavier, letting your body be completely held by the support and surfaces beneath. Another 4 or 5 more breaths, give or take. Just simply breathe, rest, and explore all the ways you can feel ease within your body as well as your mind. Follow this next breath all the way to the top. Exhale it all the way to the bottom. And then at the bottom of the breath, draw your low belly in and up. Then gently roll into the fetal position on your left side. Settle there a couple moments, and then eventually return onto your back. Here you can allow the knees to stay bent, feet flat on the floor. You can set your bolster aside. Just take a moment here for the spine to neutralize. And then from there, hug both knees deep into your chest. Give yourself a great big squeeze. Gently roll onto your right or left side and eventually push the earth away, rising forward and up into kneeling. Once you make your way into kneeling, reach for your blocks, place them in front of you, and then your bolster right on top. And again, you can play around with the different height settings. You can have it higher, lower, just depending on what feels most supportive for your body. Then big toes to touch, knees out to the side, and take care of your knees. If you need any extra cushion underneath, feel free to use to reach for exactly that. Or you could always place a little towel roll to the back of the knees. Take some of the bend out of the knees. Give the knees a little break. Otherwise, if you're in the clear, start to fold forward, hinging forward out of the hips, and take either cheek or ear to your bolster. At any point in time, you can reposition your head left or right, just depending on what feels most supportive for the head and neck. You can experiment with walking the arms a little wider, a little further forward, so that your upper body is fully supported by the props as opposed to the strength of the arms or even the positioning of the arms. Notice if the breath has shallowed in any way, and if it has, then now's a perfect time for you to enliven it once again. Not that there's any effort to the breathing, but just starting to experiment of on breathing into the back body, encouraging the back body to expand to accommodate the breath in. So as you initiate the inhale, can you feel the low back start to widen? You breathe more deeply, can you feel it move into the mid back? And then right there at the top of the breath, can you feel your shoulder blades widen further? And then with the exhale, can you feel yourself soften into the support beneath? And we'll be here again for another couple minutes. So just know that you have lots of time to let go and to breathe. Moving at a snail's pace, begin to walk yourself back up to kneeling. Then you can set your bolster off to the side. You might like it for future use. And then take your blocks, place them towards the front corners of your mat. Come to kneeling. And if you're craving stretching out the legs for a moment, feel free to do so. You could even press back to a little down dog if you're craving doing so. And then slowly step your right foot in between your hands. And again, this is a great time to reach for your sukha mat if you're looking for a little added support to the back knee. One thing I like to do when kneeling is to draw the back heel towards the buttock and then release the foot back to the floor. That'll sometimes move the patella out of the way or just take a little pressure off the knee. And then back up the lunge ever so slightly so that you can zip your hips to the ribs and lengthen the tail. And then with that positioning of the pelvis, let the hips sling back in. Add a slight scissoring action. So you're drawing your right hip slightly back and nudging your left hip slightly forward just to release some of the tension out of the left hip and the left hip. If you're feeling any pinch to the low back, you can pitch your torso even further forward or cinch up through the core even further, drawing your low belly in and up towards the spine. Now close the eyes or steady the gaze. And once again, direct your attention back into the breath. This is one of my favorite postures to reset the low back by releasing the hip flexors. It helps to rebalance the positioning of the pelvis. Helps to release it from an anterior tilt to a posterior tilt. So it helps to take pressure off the lumbar spine. You can even use your imagination and envision your breath flooding into the lower left quadrant of your abdomen. A good 3, 4 more breaths here. Let the left hip get a little heavier. Lean into gravity's reach. One more inhale. One last exhale. And then flutter your eyes open. Begin to shift your hips back in line with your left knee. Walk your hands back, take your blocks with you, and then wiggle your right heel forward. Keep a little micro bend into the right knee. And then again, that same little scissoring action of drawing your right hip back. Maintain a natural curve of the low back. So you want to make sure you're not hollowing out through the spine. And then from there, extend the sternum forward. You can even walk your hands a little further forward if that's within reach. And then drape your rib cage down the length of the right thigh. You can pause here. You can even play around with tipping the toes a little out to the side or to the inside or straight up to the sky and see if there's a sweet spot that's encouraging you to linger. And then from there, rest your eyes, blink the lids closed, and turn your gaze inward. Breathe here. And as you encourage the right hamstring or the back of the right leg to release, you might also feel a little sensation through the back of the lower leg, the calf, Achilles. Notice anywhere else that your body might be holding tension. So, can you allow the shoulders to relax? Maybe a little bend into the elbows. Can you relax the jaw, even the skin on the face? One more inhale here. One last exhale. And then begin to shift your weight forward till your knee is on top of your ankle. Walk your hands a little further forward as well. Toe heel the right foot across so that your right shin is at about a 45-degree angle. Your right foot is slightly forward and in front of your left hip. Then slide the left leg as far back as it will reach. Here you might set your sukha mat or extra cushioning off to the side, or you might like it underneath the hips. And then let your hips start to sink in towards the mat. So think of level pelvis, almost like you could rest an egg on the sacrum. Reach for your props. And here you might use your blocks to rest forward onto. You could even play with them so that they're shoulder width apart. You might lower forearms down. You could even place your blocks or bolster right on top. If you're looking for a little added cush to the outer right hip, you can also snug your bolster underneath your right buttock in between your hip and the floor. And so play around with different props. We'll have a few minutes here to rest into the pose. And this is one of my favorite postures to help open up the outer glutes and to help release the piriformis that sometimes can pinch into the or into the sciatic nerve. And if you're ever experiencing sciatic nerve pain, this is something you can visit a couple times a day. You don't have to spend a long period of time. Just gently softening your way in just to create a little more space around that nerve. Now that you've been here a couple moments, can you find anywhere else again that you might be able to soften, integrate more use of props, or deepen into the breath? Just fine tuning the posture to support your practice. And then begin to slowly rise back up onto the hands. You can walk your blocks a little ways further forward, inch your back knee in a couple times. And then eventually unravel the right leg. You might extend it straight back, or you can pedal out through the feet, pressing back into a downward facing dog. And then from there, return back onto the knees. I like to have, again, always the props within reach. Blocks to the front corners of the mat, left foot in between the hands, sliding the right leg as far back as it will reach. Little self adjustment by drawing your right heel to the buttock and then setting the foot back down. Then back off the lunge slightly. Create a slight pelvic tilt, zipping hips to ribs, lengthening your tailbone towards the earth. Then send the hips forward. Option here to tilt the torso forward just to ensure there's no compression into the low back. The blocks are merely there to extend the arms, especially if the floor feels far away, or just to give you a little added support. Then blink your eyes closed once again. Direct your awareness inward. With each exhale, allow your right hip to get a little bit heavier. Let it slink and sling its way forward. Again, you can use your imagination and envision the breath being flooded to the front of the lower right hip. Last full deep breath in. Follow it to the very, very top. Follow it out to the very bottom. And then flutter the eyes open. Begin to shift your hips back in line with your right knee. And take your blocks with you. And then straighten through your left leg. It doesn't have to be all the way straight. You can keep a little bend into the left knee. Scissor the hips, tuck your left hip back, nudge the right hip forward, and keep a subtle curvature of the low back of the spine. Now from there, extend the sternum forward and drape your torso down the length of the left thigh. Again, you can play around with the positioning of the left foot, toes to the sky, tilted left or right. Targeting sensation through the back of the upper left leg, the lower left leg. You might feel a gentle stretch through the low back, but making sure that it's not pulling or tugging anywhere along your sacrum or along from the low back to the tailbone area. Notice if the sensation has begun to dissipate, has it stayed the same? Just observing all that is present for you, body, mind, as well as heart. Last full breath in here, and last full breath out. And then from there, begin to rebend into the left knee, walk your arms forward. Cross your left shin diagonally across the torso so that your right foot is in front of your right hip. And then slide the right leg as far back as it will reach. Here again, you can play around with the use of props. You might like them underneath the forearms. You might like to use them similar to how you had in child's pose, having a little something to rest forward into, or you might love the bolster to the outer left hip, having a little cush, a little added support, something to rest into. So experimenting with what feels best in your body, what feels sustainable for the duration of the pose, and then settling your way in, returning your mind's attention back into the breath, feeling the full wave of breath as it moves in, feeling it expand you from within. Each exhale softening you as you release, encouraging your awareness to move further and further inside. Last deep breath in here. Full and complete breath out. And then begin to rise all the way back up onto your hands. You can inch the back leg forward a couple times. And then unravel the left leg, extend it straight back, perhaps into a three-legged table or maybe even a downward facing dog. Any little micro movements, they're always welcome just to help to wash any after image of the shape and to return you back to balance. And then from there, find a comfortable seat. You could come seated onto your block in kneeling. You might choose to come to cross-legged position instead. And then take hold of your strap. And taking the strap, unraveling it, taking the arms wider, well wider than your, much wider than your shoulders. Begin to extend the arms overhead and watch for the shoulders starting to creep up around the ears. Encourage them to remain soft and a subtle micro bend into the elbows. Then begin to extend the arms straight. Notice how this feels. Sometimes you can make a little self adjustment, just adjusting one shoulder and the next. And then reach a little further back. Notice the tendency to arc the spine As much as possible, zip your hips to the ribs and keep the spine neutral, isolating the rotation and the opening into the arms. Reach a little further back. Check back in with the breath, and if it's shallow or unsteady, can you even it out in any way or just smoothen it a smidgen? And then reach as far as you can reach for these next 5 breaths. Breathe in full. Breathe out empty. Slow and steady, savoring each and every portion of the breath. Then reach as far as you can reach. And if you need to widen the grip, feel free to do so until you can reach all the way back and then down. Again, keep a little micro bend in the elbows. And then begin to rotate the arms forward and out and in front of you. We'll do that a few more times. Avoid ducking or adjusting one arm higher or lower than the other, even if that means taking the arms or hands a little bit wider. Couple more times, back and forth, circling the arms in the shoulder socket. A little bit of movement to facilitate the opening. Last time here. The next time you reach the arms back, you can set the strap off to the side and just simply notice how you're feeling in the shoulders, perhaps through the neck as well, all the way to the fingertips. And then when you're ready, return onto your back. You'll want to have your block and bolsters within reach. You can set the strap and Suka mat off to the side. Once you lay onto your back, hug the knees momentarily into the chest. Give yourself a great big squeeze. And then release both feet to the floor. Keep the knees bent. Grounding into your feet, press feet firmly into the earth and then lift your hips skyward. Place a block then underneath your sacrum. So a little closer to your heels than your shoulders, so that it's not in any way in the lower back, but closer to your tailbone. Walk the shoulder blades together, palms face open. That feels best in your shoulders. You can play around, see where you wish to remain. And then settle your attention back into the breath. Let the eyes softly close once again. Option to stay exactly as you are. Or if you're looking to take a load off, you can float the legs skyward. Another option would be to extend the legs out long, keeping a slight tilt of the pelvis and then releasing through the hip flexors. For me, my low back always wants to compensate. So if you find that to be the case in your body, you could work one leg and then the neck. In whichever variation you're in, continue to breathe here for the next 10 breaths. Again, leave the count entirely to me. If the legs are overhead, start to return them back to the earth. Or if the legs are stretched long, begin to bend the knees, walk the feet back in. and then rest here for a couple more rounds of breathing. From there, ground into the feet, lift your hips a smidgen higher up and off the block. Remove the block out from underneath, and then slide your bolster underneath your thighs, preparing for Shavasana. Now, if there's a different posture you prefer, you might even prefer seated meditation for the next 3 minutes. Feel free to, or 3 to 5 minutes rather, feel free to head on in. And again, if there's a different shape your body's craving at this time, by all means, feel free to take it. Once again, scan your body and pay particular attention to all the parts of your body that is connected into the mat, the floor, a cushion, or a prop. Feel deeply into those surfaces and explore all the ways you can let your body melt into them just a little bit more. Om Namah Shivaya Gurave Satchidananda Saye Nishprapanchaya Shantaya Nirmalambaya Tejase Om Namah Shivaya Gurave Satchidananda Murtaye Nishprapanchaya Shantaya Nirbai Tejase Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Begin to deepen back into the breath. Wiggle your fingers, toes, and indulge here with a great big luxurious stretch. From there, hug both of your knees deep into your chest. Give yourself a squeeze. Thank yourself for getting on your mat. Then either rock up and down the length of the spine to seated or over to your right side. Rest there a breath or two longer. And then with the strength of your hands, push the earth away, rise forward and up. Come to seated. Bring your hands from there into prayer or place them over your heart and bow slightly inward. Acknowledge yourself here and in this moment. Carry this practice with you often into your day, this connection to self, to the breath, to your inner being. Thank you so much for being here. Namaste.